My name is Sierra Langdon. I'm 41 years old. I serve as a colonel in the United States Air Force. Most of my work, let's just say, it doesn't get discussed at dinner tables. And definitely not at weddings. That night, I sat at the last table. Table 19, tucked behind the champagne bar, right next to the restrooms. No name card, no seat assignment, no welcome hug. Just a folded napkin and a glass of water waiting, like even the staff hadn't expected me to show. The reception hall was something out of a bridal magazine, crystal chandeliers, a string quartet near the fountain, and a glowing ice sculpture in the shape of a swan. My sister Savannah always did like drama. She called it romantic flair. I called it exhausting. I hadn't seen her in 3 years. The invitation came in a glittery envelope that said dress code, sparkle, or nothing. I wore my service dress uniform, not out of pride, not even out of protest, just because it still fit. And it still meant something, at least to me. I was refilling my glass when Savannah tapped the microphone. She stood in the center of the dance floor, hair perfectly curled, diamonds catching every spotlight. She raised her glass, looking right past me. "Let's raise a toast," she smiled wide. "To my sister, Sierra. She came all the way back from outer space, Cyber Command, some secret base. Honestly, I don't even know anymore." Laughter rippled across the room. "She's so boring," she went on. "I mean, who takes notes for a living? GPS jokes, anyone?" More laughter. I heard someone at the next table say, "I thought she worked at NASA or something." I didn't flinch. I just set my glass down. Let the joke land. Let it echo. She'd always done this, turning rooms against me without raising her voice. When we were kids, she'd play the princess. I'd be the dragon. And even now, in a ballroom packed with 200 guests and a custom monogram on the dance floor, she still needed me to be the joke. Why? I could have stood up then. I could have spoken. But legends don't argue. They wait. And in that moment, I waited. I noticed the change before it happened. A shift in the air. A silence too precise to be accidental. Eric, the groom, froze. Glass in hand. Smile faltering. His eyes flicked toward someone at the head table. Seated next to the father of the bride was a man I hadn't expected to see. General Marcus Weston. 4 stars. Retired, but still powerful. His posture, still military. His eyes, sharper than ever. Eric leaned in, whispering something into the general's ear. I couldn't hear the words, but I saw the reaction. General Weston turned to look directly at me. It wasn't a glance. It was a scan. Recognition lit in his eyes, slow, sure, and steady. Then, he stood. The chair scraped sharply against the floor. Heads turned. He stepped forward, adjusted his cufflinks, and raised his hand to his forehead. A full salute. Formal, unmistakable. "Ma'am," he said, his voice clear, carrying across the hall. "The honor is ours to have you here." The room fell into stunned silence. The music stopped. Forks froze halfway to mouths. One of the bridesmaids gasped audibly. Savannah's jaw dropped. She looked at her new father-in-law, then back at me. "Wait, what?" she whispered, but no one answered. All around the room, military officers began standing, one by one, like a wave of acknowledgement. A young pilot in dress blues, a naval commander in a wheelchair. Even the wedding DJ stood, hand on heart. They all faced me. And still, I hadn't moved. The microphone slipped from Savannah's fingers, crashing to the floor with a loud pop. It sounded like a gunshot in the silence. She stepped back, blinking fast. Eric reached for her hand, but she pulled away. And in that one moment, the room turned. Not toward the bride, not toward the dance floor, but toward the woman at table 19, me. I didn't smile, didn't cry, didn't stand. I didn't need to. I nodded, once. It wasn't permission, it wasn't humility, it wasn't even pride. It was confirmation. I was here. And for the first time in a long time, they finally saw me, not as Savannah's sister, not as the wedding's awkward relative, not as someone to mock, erase, or ignore. They saw me. Colonel Sierra Langdon. The woman they'd almost forgotten. The legend they could no longer deny. And I wasn't going anywhere. 4 years before the wedding, I was in line for my first star. Brigadier General. After 2 decades of classified operations, a dozen overseas deployments, and enough commendations to cover a hallway wall, the board finally saw fit to nominate me. It wasn't a surprise, it was overdue. The interview was scheduled for Monday. On Friday afternoon, I received a message from a senior clerk. "Colonel Langdon, please confirm your withdrawal from the shortlist." My stomach dropped. I hadn't withdrawn. I called the Pentagon, got transferred, waited on hold for 2 hours, no answers. When I finally got through to someone in records integrity, they sounded uneasy. "Ma'am, a letter was submitted, anonymous, alleging falsified mission credit and exaggerated leadership roles. Due to the sensitive nature, your name has been paused from consideration." I didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't even ask to see it, because I knew exactly what had been said. I didn't need to read the letter to feel the knife. Still, it took another week to get a copy, unofficially, through a friend in admin who owed me a favor. One look at the wording, and my hands went cold. Colonel Langdon has a pattern of claiming credit where her actual involvement was limited. I saw firsthand how she overstated her role in Operation Granite Fall. She was barely more than a liaison officer. It was nonsense, but it was strategic nonsense. Granite Fall had been buried in layers of bureaucracy, hard to verify, harder to disprove. Most of the unit logs were redacted. But there was something else. Buried in the 3rd paragraph was a word that stopped me cold. Irregardless. Spelled just like that. I hadn't seen that word since high school, because no one used it, except Savannah. She used to throw it into debates just to sound more important. I remember a teacher correcting her once, and Savannah snapped back. "Well, it's in the dictionary now, so I'm not wrong." She'd use it every chance she got after that. Her own little rebellion against sounding average. I could still hear her voice, mocking. And just like that, a chill ran through me. It wasn't proof, not legally, but it was personal proof. Who else knew enough about Granite Fall to spin a lie? Who else would care enough to drag me down on the edge of my promotion? Someone jealous. Someone who didn't serve but always wanted the spotlight. Someone who saw my rise as her fall. It wasn't enough for Savannah to ignore my career. She had to erase it. The letter had no name, but it didn't need one. And just like that, everything stopped. My name vanished from the promotion list. No explanation, no rebuttal process, no hearing. Just silence. The kind of silence that sounds like punishment, that follows you like a shadow in every briefing room. That makes commanders flinch before assigning you to anything with too much visibility. It took me 2 years to crawl back into the central command track. By then, the damage was done. The star I'd earned had been handed to someone else. I never told anyone. Not because I was ashamed. Because I wasn't done. And Savannah? She thought she'd buried me with a single envelope, but all she did was delay the reckoning. And the wedding? That was just the dress rehearsal. Most people assume the Air Force ends at the edge of the sky. They have no idea that real operations start far above it. I served under the United States Space Operations Command. My division? Orbital Threat Response. A black cell nestled deep inside Cheyenne Mountain, 5 levels below the lowest tour access. We didn't wear flight suits. We wore silence, no windows, no phones, no sunlight, just screens, maps that changed by the hour, and silence that hummed with the weight of the world. And everything beyond it. You wouldn't find our base on Google Maps. You wouldn't even find the building we worked in. My name was stamped across reports marked in red ink, filed through special clearances. I coordinated live defense protocols between ground control and orbital intercept. That means when something unknown entered upper stratosphere, we knew it first, and we knew it last. My unit operated on predictive silence. We anticipated threats before they had shape. We tracked debris that could shatter satellites worth more than entire countries. We ran simulations of space warfare that the public wasn't even ready to imagine. I made decisions in seconds that never got discussed in press briefings, because they never reached Earth. And yet, if you ask my family what I did for a living, "She stares at computers all day," Savannah once said to a friend at brunch. "Does something with satellites or aliens," she laughed. "She's not really military, she just lives in that bunker." To them, I was the weird sister, the one who never wore makeup, who didn't squeal over bridal showers or share Pinterest boards, the one who could have been pretty if she smiled more. Savannah used to say I lived with machines, that I forgot how to be a woman, that real girls don't talk about orbital drift over dinner. They didn't understand that I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I didn't become a soldier to be liked. I didn't serve my country so I could be palatable. I learned how to launch a countermeasure while disassociating from physical pain. I learned how to stabilize a satellite relay system while my hands shook from sleep deprivation. I learned how to brief commanders twice my rank, without blinking, even when one of them once said, "Langdon, you'd be perfect if you were a man. They'd already put your face on a coin." That line stuck with me for years. I never told Savannah. She would have turned it into a joke. Or worse, used it in one of her wedding toasts. And that's the thing. You can live through re-entry turbulence. You can train for orbital collisions. But nothing prepares you for the slow erosion of being invisible to your own blood. Nothing prepares you for the moment you realize your family only claps for medals they understand. And mine? They didn't even ask what I did. They assumed I was lonely, broken, cold. They never knew I carried codes that could avert a global incident. Never knew I held secrets that presidents didn't get full access to. Never asked. I was orbiting. And to them, I was already gone. But I was still here, tracking, watching, waiting. Not for applause, but for the moment I'd no longer need it. The envelope shimmered like it belonged on a teenager's birthday card, not a wedding. Gold foil edges, tiny rhinestones on the flap, and God help me, a sticker that said, "Sparkle or nothing." It landed in my mailbox on a Thursday, wedged between a declassified satellite failure brief and a notice from base security. I almost threw it out with the junk mail. Almost. Then I saw the names, Savannah Grace Langdon and Eric Weston. I froze. Not because of Savannah, though even in print, her name carried the weight of every eye roll and backhanded compliment I'd survived since childhood. But because of his, Eric Weston. The name stirred something sharp. A hallway. A moment. A voice like gravel and gravitas. It was 5 years ago. I had just delivered a closed-door report on an orbital redirection maneuver. Something that, had it gone wrong, would have taken out a Russian intel satellite and triggered more than a diplomatic nightmare. The meeting had drained me. I stepped into the Pentagon hallway, still hearing the echo of my own debrief. And then, Langdon, I turned. A man in full uniform stood at the far end of the corridor. 4 stars, crisp stance. He looked like he'd walked straight out of a recruitment poster. General Marcus Weston. He didn't smile, not quite. But there was a glint in his eye I hadn't seen in any of the others that day. He walked over slowly, glanced at my nameplate, then said, "If you were a man, they'd already put your face on a coin." Just like that. No introduction, no small talk. Just truth, dropped like a pin on marble floors. I'd nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I understood what he meant. He wasn't praising me, he was indicting the system. And now, his son was marrying my sister. I stared at the glittering card. Savannah had chosen a venue that sounded like a skincare brand, Lumet Estate. She requested cocktail attire with pops of personality. She added a note, clearly directed at me. "No uniforms, please. It's a wedding, not a war room." I nearly laughed. Part of me wanted to ignore it, toss the card, pretend I never saw it. But another part, the part that remembered the hallway, the 4 stars, the old man's words, paused. If General Weston was going to be there, maybe it wasn't Savannah I was meant to face. Maybe it was the legacy, the silence. The reason my name never made it back on the promotion list. I pressed my thumb to the edge of the card. It caught the light, fool's gold pretending to be something precious. Maybe I'd go, not for Savannah, not for Eric. But because when a system tries to erase you, sometimes showing up is the most radical thing you can do. My name is Colonel Sierra Langdon, 41 years old. I've worn this uniform for 2 decades. I've worked in bunkers that don't exist on maps. I've issued commands that redirected objects traveling 17,000 miles per hour. I've stood in rooms where silence is more lethal than any bullet. But on the night I flew home for my sister's wedding, I felt still. Not weak, not uncertain, just still, like the air before a storm, waiting. I booked the latest flight out of DC, the kind that boards after most terminals have emptied and cleaning crews are already scrubbing gum off armrests. It was easier that way. No small talk, no send-offs. No one to ask why I looked like I was going into battle with nothing but a carry-on. I wore my dress blues, colonel's stripes, silver insignia, hair pinned tight. No ribbons, no medals. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I just didn't need decoration to prove what I'd done. Not anymore. The cab ride to Reagan was quiet. The driver asked if I was traveling for business. I said family. He didn't press. I moved through the terminal unnoticed, blending in like furniture. That's the strange blessing of airports. People only really see themselves, where they're going, what they're escaping, not who's next to them. At security, I stepped into the line marked military priority. The TSA officer glanced at my uniform, gave a nod, and waved me forward without a word. Efficient, cold, familiar. I slipped off my shoes, removed my belt, watched the tray slide into the scanner like a ritual I'd done 1,000 times. Then, just as I stepped through the body scanner, I heard a voice behind me. "Ma'am." I turned. A young Air Force lieutenant stood at parade rest near the edge of the screening area. Early 20s, clean shave, nervous eyes. He didn't speak again, but he saluted. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a crisp motion of respect. One that could have easily gone unnoticed by every traveler around us. I returned it, briefly, silently, no smile. Just the acknowledgement of what passed between us. Not rank, not ceremony, but understanding. He had recognized me. He didn't say how. Maybe it was a briefing, a photo in an obscure article, or just whispers. Military circles are small, and myths travel faster than fact. Whatever it was, he stood a little taller after I acknowledged him. Like it mattered, like I mattered. I walked on. My gait was half deserted. A man in headphones snored into a neck pillow. A toddler dropped Cheerios onto the carpet like confetti. The gate agent typed slowly, one key at a time. I sat near the window, watched planes take off. Tiny, brilliant escapes carving streaks across the night. Somewhere out there, Savannah was perfecting centerpieces and high heels. Somewhere out there, General Marcus Weston, her soon-to-be father-in-law, was likely pressing his uniform, shining his stars. And somewhere inside me, something was settling. I wasn't angry, I wasn't resentful, but I wasn't numb anymore, either. I'd been pulled from a promotion list without explanation, branded difficult, intense, unsmiling, left off family calls, forgotten in photo albums. But here I was, on a one-way ticket back into the lion's den. Not for revenge, for truth, for silence to be broken. My flight boarded without ceremony. I took my seat by the window, the hum of engines beneath me, the weight of metal and memory pressing down. As the plane lifted, I watched the city shrink. Pentagon lights faded, runways blurred. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I wasn't who I used to be. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid to be seen. I left home after a dinner I can still taste. Dry turkey, overcooked beans, and words sharper than the carving knife. I was 21. The night before Savannah's high school graduation, she was the golden girl, the family's crown jewel. Straight-A student, prom queen, early admission to Duke. Mom had spent weeks planning her party. Matching centerpieces, personalized napkins, monogrammed cake. I showed up in uniform. Newly minted cadet, West Point graduate, proud and stiff in my Class A's. My boots were polished, my hair pinned. I'd earned every thread on that uniform, and I wanted my family to see it, just once. Dinner started tense. Mom didn't even comment on the uniform. Dad avoided eye contact. Savannah kept checking her phone, waiting for some boy to text. I tried to ignore the silence. I tried to pretend it wasn't heavy. Then, over dessert, Mom looked up from her slice of lemon pie and said, "If you wear that tomorrow, don't come." Just like that. 14 words that landed like a rifle shot. She said it in the same tone she used to tell us to wash our hands before dinner. Calm, final, practiced. I didn't speak. I didn't even breathe. Dad said nothing. Savannah smiled at her plate, like it was funny, or fair. I stood up, pushed back the chair, and folded my napkin. No one stopped me. Not even the dog followed me to the door. I walked out with my keys in my hand and my heart in my throat. I didn't take anything with me. No suitcase, no photo albums, no second chances. That was 20 years ago. I didn't go to Savannah's graduation. I didn't visit for birthdays. I wasn't there when our uncle died, when Savannah got engaged the first time, or when Dad broke his hip. I sent cards, unsigned. I wired money through aliases. I stayed in the shadows because that's what they wanted. A daughter who stayed quiet. A sister who disappeared neatly. I built my life in the dark, one classified mission at a time. But the truth? That night, the night I left, I wasn't hurt. I was free. Because it told me exactly who I was up against. Not an enemy overseas, but a silence that lived in my own bloodline. A silence that punished difference, that laughed at strength, that found uniformity more beautiful than courage. I never wore that lemon pie again, never ate it, never craved it. But I remember the exact angle of Mom's jaw when she said those words. If you wear that tomorrow, don't come. I wore it anyway, and I never went back. Until now. The first thing that hit me was the scent. Roses and jasmine, thick enough to drown in. The second was the silence behind the perfection. I stepped into the resort ballroom and paused at the entrance, taking in the spectacle. Crystal chandeliers hung like constellations. Floor-to-ceiling walls were veiled in draped silk and cascading flowers. Orchids, hydrangeas, pale pink peonies. The kind of wedding Savannah had always dreamed of. The kind that came with a hashtag and a drone photographer. Every detail shimmered. Even the champagne flutes had custom etching. Her initials with Eric's twined like ivy. I scanned the mirrored seating chart, names scripted in gold on a panel of tempered glass, backlit like a gallery. Row after row. Friends, distant relatives, college roommates, not me. There was no Langdon listed, no Sierra, not even a vague +1. There was no table number for me, no placeholder card, no folded napkin waiting. I didn't flinch, I didn't sigh. I'd packed a protein bar in my clutch, just in case. A server passed with a tray of flutes. I took one. Another passed with hors d'oeuvres. I declined. No one greeted me. No one even looked twice. That's what happens when you train your body to move like shadow. When your breathing mimics the tempo of static. When you've served long enough in places where recognition is a risk, you learn how to vanish without disappearing. And still, I was there. I walked the perimeter of the room slowly, heels muted by the plush carpet. The DJ was sound-checking a classical string cover of a pop song I couldn't name. A table with glitter pens invited guests to write a wish for the bride. The pens were arranged in a heart shape. Another station had a Polaroid wall titled Our Favorite Faces. Mine wasn't there. There were candids of Savannah laughing, Savannah dancing, Savannah in graduation robes, Savannah on beaches and boats. She was the main character in every frame. The world tilted to her smile. None of the photos included me, not one. I stared at them for a moment. Not because it hurt. I'd already buried that. But because it confirmed what I knew. I'd been written out of the narrative years ago. I didn't resent it. I just noted it, like a soldier logging terrain. No path forward, no cover, no backup. Still, I stayed. I sipped the champagne, not too fast. Not to numb anything, just enough to blend in. I chose a seat near the back, not a real table, more of a satellite setup. Next to the emergency exit and a potted plant meant to hide a fuse box. It was fine. I didn't need to be seen. I didn't come to be seen. I came to see. My name hadn't been spoken all night until now. Savannah held the mic like it was a champagne flute, tilting it with grace, savoring the sound of her own voice. The spotlight caught the rhinestones in her hair, making her look like royalty carved out of glass. She was already tipsy, or pretending to be. And now, she said with mock ceremony, I'd like to thank a very special guest, my sister, Sierra. She's so boring. Laughter rolled across the room like staged applause. I mean, who shows up to a wedding dressed like they're headed to a war memorial? GPS jokes, anyone? Because I'm still trying to locate her personality. My name landed like a paper cut. Not deep, but sharp. Not fatal, but deliberate. I didn't blink. I didn't move. Eric, her groom, did. He leaned toward the head of the table and whispered something to the man beside him. The man turned his head, slowly, deliberately. It was General Marcus Weston. I I recognized him immediately. His presence was unmistakable. Rigid spine, steel gray hair, ribbons that spanned from shoulder to chest. The man didn't wear a uniform. He was the uniform. Our eyes locked. For a second, the room froze. His brow furrowed, not in confusion, but in recognition. He rose from his chair, not in hesitation, but in certainty. He buttoned his jacket, squared his shoulders, and turned to face me. Then he saluted. "Ma'am," he said. His voice rang through the silence. "The honor is ours to have you here." Time didn't stop. It snapped. Chairs scraped. Silverware paused midair. A server dropped a spoon. I heard Savannah gasp. She dropped the mic. It clattered against the stage and rolled unnoticed toward the polished floor beneath the sweetheart table. Eric stood, startled, unsure whether to follow or freeze. But others moved. One officer seated at table 4 pushed back his chair and stood, placing his hand in a salute. Then another. A woman in mess dress at the far side of the room rose quietly and did the same. A third, a fourth. One by one, they stood. Air Force, Navy, Army, even a Marine with a silver bar on his shoulder. Not in sync, not choreographed, but unified. A silent current swept the room, not one of spectacle, but of respect, of recognition, of something too deeply ingrained to fake. They saluted not just me, but what I stood for. Years of command. Deployments no one tracked. Missions that didn't make the news. Papers signed in rooms without windows. Nights spent staring at orbital maps instead of ceilings. I hadn't asked for it, hadn't even hinted at it, but they knew. And Savannah? Her face twisted. First confusion, then something more primal. Disbelief, disorientation. As if the world had suddenly flipped its axis and she was falling upward. I didn't rise. I didn't need to. I stayed seated, my back straight, eyes forward, hands calm. I met every salute with a nod, not out of humility, but out of understanding. Respect is not owed, it is earned. And once earned, it doesn't flinch under glitter or gossip. Savannah stumbled back from the mic, reaching for Eric, who had gone pale. His mouth moved, but no sound came. He turned to his father as if to anchor himself. But the general remained standing, gaze fixed on me like I was the only true landmark in the room. The music had stopped. The spotlight, by some accident of timing or fate, shifted and bathed me in soft gold. I didn't flinch. This wasn't about revenge. This wasn't about show. It was a reckoning. And in that moment, no one cared about seating charts, family feuds, or monogrammed wedding favors. They saw me, not Sierra, the sister, not the outcast, not the cautionary tale, but the soldier, the leader, the one who didn't need a mic to be heard. I raised my glass, not to toast, but to acknowledge. Let them remember this. Let them tell stories of the night a general stood. Savannah took a step back. Her face, just moments ago glowing with smug delight, drained to ash. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Her hands, the same hands that had so confidently held the mic, now trembled. She gripped the mic like it was slipping through her fingers, and then she let it fall. "It's just a joke," she said, too soft at first. Then louder. "It was just a joke." No one laughed. Not Eric, not his groomsmen, not the guests, now quiet as a courtroom. She turned, looking for someone, anyone, to join in. To break the silence, to reassure her that this was all still hers. The stage, the lights, the applause. But no one moved. The mic rolled until it hit the base of a rose column. Even that small sound echoed. Savannah wasn't crying, not yet. She was still fighting to keep the shape of the moment as she had designed it. But it was melting, slipping through the seams of her vision. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice cracking beneath its own weight. "You all don't even know her." General Weston didn't speak. He didn't need to. He remained standing, posture straight, salute held, eyes locked on me. He wasn't defending me. He was honoring me. That distinction made all the difference. "I mean, she's my sister," Savannah tried again, voice rising like a balloon drifting out of control. She's not even close with the family anymore." Still, no response. The weight of the room had shifted. She wasn't the gravity here. Someone in the back cleared their throat. That was it. She took another step backward. Her heels caught the edge of the platform and she stumbled slightly, grabbing the side of the podium to steady herself. The image of control shattered. It happened so fast, yet in slow motion. The bride, center of the spotlight, queen of the floral kingdom, was now a silhouette against her own celebration. Her dress sparkled too brightly, like a mirror under harsh light. And in that reflection, she saw what no one dared say out loud. This moment no longer belonged to her. She had orchestrated everything down to the napkin folds. She'd chosen a seat for every guest, curated hashtags, even programmed the lighting to fade gently as speeches began. But she hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected silence to be louder than applause. She hadn't expected that a salute would carry more weight than a toast. And she hadn't expected to be alone, absolutely, unequivocally alone, in the moment she had tried to dominate. She looked at me then. Truly looked. It wasn't apology in her eyes, not yet. But it was fear, recognition. Like for the first time she saw something beyond the sister she'd always dismissed. She saw the woman who had walked into that room not to make a scene, but to carry her own name with quiet dignity. And Savannah? She disappeared. Not physically, but emotionally. The crowd didn't need to exile her. She exiled herself, unraveling beneath the very lights she had arranged. And I remained still, because I didn't need to rise to take back my name. It was already standing. I didn't need applause. I didn't need a microphone, a spotlight, or a replay of the salute. I had never come for any of it. I stood slowly, quietly, smoothing the line of my uniform as if brushing off years of silence. Around me, no one moved, no one spoke. I wasn't part of the script Savannah had written, but somehow I had become the ending. I didn't look at her, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I knew she wasn't ready for what I represented. Truth, unvarnished. I walked past the head table, where her bouquet still lay untouched, past the champagne flutes with etched initials, past the designer aisle runner she'd once made us measure 3 times on Zoom. My heels echoed over polished floors like a slow drum beat. No clapping followed, no murmurs, only stillness. And then General Weston. He took one step back as I approached, not out of retreat, out of deference. "Ma'am," he said again, this time quieter. Not for the room, just for me. I nodded once. My voice stayed in my chest. I had nothing more to prove. I passed him and kept going, eyes forward, posture straight. The doors at the back of the ballroom came into view. Heavy mahogany, gleaming gold handles. A young enlisted man in dress blues, maybe part of the groom's unit, reached to open them, but I lifted a hand. I opened them myself, because walking through them was mine to do. The hallway outside was quiet, carpeted, lined with mirrors and soft wall sconces, the kind of place meant for selfies and whispered gossip. But here, now, it was something else entirely. It was peace. Behind me, I heard nothing. Not the clatter of shoes chasing after me, not Savannah's voice trying to twist the story back in her favor. Not a single apology. And I didn't need one. I had waited years for someone to speak my name without mocking it. Years for someone to see my service not as a punchline or a quirk, but as sacrifice, as integrity, as something earned. That had happened. And now I was done. I didn't rush. I walked with the rhythm of someone who had crossed deserts, terminals, hangars, foreign streets. Someone who knew that real arrival is measured not in noise, but in weight lifted. And as the doors behind me eased shut, the final sound that drifted into the corridor wasn't a cheer. It was silence, but not empty silence. The kind that follows a storm, the kind that settles dust, the kind that changes things. They would talk about me now, but not like before, not in whispers, not in mockery, and certainly not with Savannah's laugh. I didn't need a seat at the table, I carried my own. 3 days later, I was at Reagan National again. Terminal C, boarding gate 42. I had my orders folded in my coat pocket, my carry-on at my feet, and a black coffee cooling beside me. I had just removed my name from the wedding group chat 2 hours earlier. No one noticed. The overhead speakers crackled out a delay announcement. Weather over Nebraska. I didn't react. But the sound of heels halting on tile made me turn. Savannah stood 10 feet away. No makeup, No bridal glow, no glitter. Just jeans and a worn college sweatshirt. Sleeves pushed up like she used to wear them when we studied in the garage during high school summers. Only this time, her eyes were different. She didn't walk over, she just slowly reached into her leather tote and pulled out a single sheet of paper, folded 4 ways, flattened too many times. She held it out. I stood and took it. It was the letter, the anonymous one from 4 years ago, the one that had destroyed my promotion board the night before it was supposed to begin. The one filled with vague slander and one unmistakable flaw. Irregardless, there it was, circled in red ink, fresh, like someone had marked it for the first time. I looked up. She was already watching me. "You always corrected me on that," she said quietly, "even in middle school essays." I didn't answer. I waited. She looked down for a second, bit her bottom lip, then met my eyes again. Not with fake tears, not with pride. Just something bare. They wanted a daughter who sparkled, who smiled when told, who wore pastel and shut up at dinner. She took a shaky breath. "You didn't do that. You never did. And they hated you for it." Her voice cracked, not loudly, but enough. "I just wanted them to love me, so I let them pick me. I let them decide which one of us deserved to be seen." She shook her head. "But that meant you had to disappear." I stared at her, at the woman who once called my boots clunky and my rank irrelevant. The woman who had written this, or maybe just signed off on it. She didn't say sorry, not once, not even close. But she didn't flinch either. "I didn't think you'd come to the wedding," she said. "When I saw you there, I thought maybe you'd forgotten." I folded the paper slow, pressed the creases back into place. "You wanted to erase me," I said, not angry, just truth. "But you forgot who taught me to endure." Her lip quivered. She nodded. "You taught me that. That's the part I couldn't erase." We stood there, just 2 sisters. On airport carpet, no cameras, no makeup, no filters. And for the first time in 20 years, Savannah looked at me without expectation, without pretending she didn't know me. For the first time, she looked at me like she saw herself, reflected, flawed, unfinished. She didn't ask for forgiveness. I wasn't ready to offer it. But something passed between us anyway. Not a bridge, not yet. Just a crack in the glass. She tucked her hands into her pockets, stepped back. "Gate 45's mine," she said. "I'm not flying first class this time." I watched her walk away. Not once did she look back. And I didn't stop her. 3 days after the airport, I received a message. Just 5 words. "I knew, I was afraid. I'm sorry." From Eric Weston. At first, I didn't reply. I stared at the screen like it might change, like the apology might grow a spine, but something about those 5 words lingered. Not because they absolved anything, but because they didn't try to. That evening, I found myself at the base bar near Fort Belvoir. Off duty, no uniform, just my old leather jacket and a quiet corner. The kind of place no one asked questions if you sat alone too long. Eric showed up 10 minutes late, as if still unsure he should come. He looked different without the dress blues, smaller, tired. Like the applause from the wedding had drained out of him, leaving just the shell of the man underneath. He didn't sit right away. He stood across from me, hands shoved in his jacket pockets, like a kid caught cheating. "I ordered club soda," he said. "Didn't think I deserved anything stronger." I raised an eyebrow. "You thought right." He took the chair, slow. No smug grin now, no charm. Just silence for a few beats. Then, I always wondered if it was her. He didn't have to say Savannah's name. I knew. "I didn't see the letter," he continued. "But the timing, the wording, it didn't feel right. You're not the kind to embellish, not the kind to chase credit." I didn't say anything. Let him keep going. I asked her once, just casually. He gave a hollow laugh. She got defensive fast. Accused me of trying to ruin her relationship with her only good sister. I backed off. He looked at me, finally. And I shouldn't have. I met his eyes. There wasn't anger in mine, just the steady weight of reality. "You made a choice," I said. "You chose the version of me that was easier to doubt." He swallowed hard. "Yeah, I did." I watched him sit with it. Let the words settle like dust. I didn't think it would matter, he said. Figured you'd bounce back. You always did. You're stronger. I leaned forward slightly. That's the thing, Eric. Strong people bleed too. We just do it where no one can applaud or pity. His shoulders dropped. The bravado that once followed him into every room was gone. I wasn't ready to admit she might be capable of something like that, he said quietly. But seeing you that night, how you stood when everyone else fell quiet, I realized something. He paused. I picked the wrong side. I looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't just ashamed. He was haunted. What do you want from me? I asked, tone even. He didn't flinch. Nothing, he said. Just to say it out loud, so you'd know. So I'd have to carry it with a name on it, not just guilt. That surprised me. Not the confession, but the clarity. We sat in silence for a while after that. No drinks, no toasts. Just the sound of a jukebox playing something slow and tired. As I got up to leave, he stood too. Not to follow, just to see me off. I hope someday you believe that I meant it, he said. I gave him a nod. Not a yes, not forgiveness, just acknowledgement. And then I left. Quietly, as I always had. But this time, I knew who really walked out heavier. I stepped into the Pentagon briefing room without a badge of rank on my collar. I didn't need it today. No ceremonial seating, no fanfare. Just a rectangular room, metal chairs, muted suits, and a screen waiting to flicker on. My name wasn't projected in bold, but my presence held the air still. The lights dimmed. The first slide appeared, SIERRA. Not my name, not an acronym for glory, but for something else. Soldier-initiated early response and recovery assistance. A system built not for medals, but for scars no one sees. For service members betrayed by those closest to them. Family, spouses, blood. The kind of betrayal that doesn't leave bruises, just makes you invisible in your own story. I had once stood in rooms like this presenting threat response models, orbital interception procedures, autonomous tracking systems. But this was different. This wasn't about satellites or strike simulations. It was about what happens when the enemy isn't wearing a different flag. But your last name, I began. 4 years ago, I was quietly removed from promotion consideration. No explanation, no investigation. Just a letter, anonymous, baseless, but effective. I clicked to the next slide. A redacted copy of the letter appeared. Irregardless circled in red. I knew who wrote it. But I also knew the system had no protocol to vet personal sabotage unless it breached official security. Reputation, I looked around the room. Apparently, it's collateral. I moved through the next phase of the presentation, the concept, the structure, the protocols. SIERRA would function like an internal net, a confidential reporting system integrated with counseling, legal consultation, and operational review, not to punish blindly, but to protect quietly. Not every threat wears a uniform, I said, and not every war happens overseas. Someone from the Joint Personnel Office asked, and who determines credibility? I nodded. Trained reviewers with field experience and psychological vetting backgrounds. It's not about chasing ghosts. It's about catching patterns. Another voice. Why now? I met their gaze. Because some of us have spent decades cleaning wounds we were told not to name. The room quieted. Not in opposition, but recognition. I clicked to the final slide. A rotating globe with data points lit across every major base, representing the number of service members who had, over the past 5 years, requested transfers, resigned early, or declined advancement citing family stressors. The numbers were staggering. This isn't just my story, I said, voice calm. It's hundreds, maybe thousands. Most won't talk, some can't. I didn't need applause. I didn't want pity. I wanted the next Sierra to have a choice, not between silence or exile, but between staying, healing, or rising. When I finished, I stepped back. One man stood, an older civilian advisor who'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan. My niece left the army last fall, he said. Filed nothing, just vanished. She told me it was her brother who leaked her unit's location to impress a girl online. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. I met his eyes. He gave a slight nod. I left the room the way I had entered, steady, unapplauded. But not unseen. Not this time. And behind me, SIERRA stayed on the screen. No longer just my project. It had become a mirror, and maybe a shield. When I was promoted to colonel, there was no call from home. No card in the mail. Not even a text from Savannah. The ceremony took place in a high-security conference room 2 floors below ground. No press, no band. Just the people who had seen me through a decade of classified missions and sleepless ops briefings. My team showed up sharp, respectful, quiet, just the way I liked it. But there was still a chair. A single empty chair placed to my left, intentionally unfilled. No one asked. No one offered to sit in it. That chair wasn't meant for them. It was meant for a version of me that almost didn't make it. The girl who once stood in front of a mirror, adjusting her Air Force blues, wondering if her mother was right, that no one would want a woman who saluted better than she smiled. It was for the 21-year-old who walked out after dinner and never went back. It was for the woman who questioned whether service and solitude were the same thing, whether trading comfort for command was a price or a gift. That chair was for her, for me. There was a moment just before the pinning when the room stood still. The officiating general recited the promotion order. I heard the words, "Extraordinary service, leadership beyond expectation, in recognition of valor." Words that could have been stitched on any ceremony, any officer. But I knew they weren't hollow, because I remembered the missions where I had to choose between 2 impossible outcomes. The colleagues I had lost to silence. The nights I rewrote contingency plans while others slept. The way I built systems designed to protect people who'd never know my name. I remembered the cost. When the insignia was pinned to my collar, I didn't look out to the room. I looked left, at the chair. It didn't need to be filled. Its presence was enough. Afterward, while others chatted over cake and duty rosters, I lingered behind. One of my junior officers, Lieutenant Mahoney, approached me. "Ma'am," he said gently, "I noticed the chair. Was someone supposed to come?" I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not sad, just quiet. "She did," I said. "She just didn't know it yet." He didn't ask anything more, just nodded and walked out, his boots respectful against the tile. That chair stayed behind when I left. Not because I forgot it, but because it didn't belong to just me anymore. It became a symbol I left in every room I led from that day on. A space held open, not for someone else's approval, but for every soldier who ever doubted their worth, because the world didn't clap loud enough when they arrived. We deserve better than that. And sometimes, we have to be the ones who save a seat for the version of ourselves that nearly gave up. To remind her, you made it. And you're not invisible anymore. Savannah was 10 when she skinned her knee on the sidewalk outside our house. She had been trying to follow me on my bike. Mine was bigger, faster, and I didn't wait. She caught the curb wrong and went down hard. By the time I turned around, her palms were scraped, and her lip trembled. But she didn't cry, at least not until I knelt beside her and said, "You're okay." Then the tears came. We had no proper first aid kit, just the junk drawer in the kitchen. So I cleaned her knee with tap water and a cotton pad, then wrapped it in duct tape. It wasn't graceful, but it held. And she looked at me like I had just performed a miracle. That same night, Mom scolded her for using my brush, said Savannah should stop copying me. Savannah didn't say anything at the time, but later, in the dark of our shared room, I heard her whisper, "I don't want to be your shadow." I didn't answer, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know how. Back then, I thought love meant protecting someone at all costs. And sometimes that meant being the strong one, the fast one, the one who rode ahead without looking back. But what it looked like to her was that I never made space. The truth is, Savannah didn't want to be me. She wanted to be seen, like me. And over time, when my name started showing up in local papers for JROTC achievements, when I got that congressional nomination for the Academy, when I saluted in front of cameras, something inside her curled away. She wanted her own spotlight, not to share mine, not to walk behind me. So when she realized the only way to shine in this family was to erase the one person blocking her son, she tried. She didn't do it with cruelty, she did it with precision, erasing me from pictures, from guest lists, from memories that were half hers. It wasn't a sudden betrayal. It was slow, calculated. Almost understandable. Almost. Because I get it now. I understand what it's like to want to be known not as someone's sister, someone's shadow, but as yourself. To want a name that doesn't come second. But understanding isn't the same as forgiving. Because she didn't just step into her own light. She tried to extinguish mine. That day at the Pentagon, when her name showed up in the complaint that nearly ended my career, she wasn't protecting herself. She was silencing me. I wish I could say I'm angry. That would be easier. But the truth? I'm tired. Tired of trying to hold love and grief in the same hand. Tired of hoping that one day she'll look at me and remember the girl who knelt in the dirt and wrapped her wounds with duct tape and the best intentions. But maybe she will. Maybe not today. Maybe not ever. But I'll remember it for both of us. My mother once called me the destroyer of the family image. Not to my face, not directly. But it was in the way her voice thinned when someone asked what I did. The way she pivoted conversations away from me at holidays. The way she displayed Savannah's prom portrait on the mantle, but left my commissioning photo buried in a drawer. It wasn't always like that. When I was small, she used to press her cool hand to my forehead when I had nightmares. She made me grilled cheese sandwiches cut diagonally, with the crust trimmed, just how I liked. There was love once, a mother's love, but it had a shape, one I had to fit into. That shape didn't wear combat boots or speak in briefings. It didn't ask hard questions or challenge silence. That shape wore pastels, crossed its legs at the ankle, and smiled politely even when it was breaking inside. When I chose the military, I broke the mold. She didn't yell, she froze. And for years, the space between us was cold and polite and hollow. Her silence said everything. She told Savannah she could have done anything, but she chose to disappear behind a uniform. No one ever asked me if the uniform helped me survive. And the day I left, after that dinner when I wore my service dress despite her warning, she didn't stop me. She just cleared the dishes and said, "Don't come back if you can't respect how this family looks." So I didn't. Not for holidays, not for graduations, not even when Dad got sick. And in that distance, I built my own identity. One not tethered to her expectations or the roles she handed out like place cards. But things shift. After the wedding, after the salute, after the silence that spread wider than anything I could have planned, she called me. Her voice cracked when she said, "I saw you, on the news. They stood for you." Then quieter, "You're my daughter." And I said nothing. Because by then, I didn't need her permission to belong to myself. Later, we met at the garden where she used to take us as kids. She brought chamomile tea in a flask and sugar cookies in a paper napkin. She looked smaller than I remembered, and older. Not just in years, but in surrender. She didn't say, "I'm sorry," not directly, but she reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. It trembled. "I should have stood up," she whispered. And for the first time, her tears weren't about disappointment. They were about time, lost time. The years she froze herself in a role she thought protected the family, when all it did was fracture it. Now she calls me my oldest. But I don't need that phrase anymore. I don't need to be firstborn or best or back in the frame. I just need the truth to be seen. And when my mother finally cried, not for Savannah, not for appearances, but for me, I saw that maybe, just maybe, healing doesn't always come with apologies. Sometimes it starts with tears. I stood behind the podium at the National Defense Symposium. The seal of the United States Air Force gleamed beside me, projected onto a giant screen. Rows of uniforms, suits, cameras, and quiet expectations stretched in front of me. I adjusted the mic. My notes sat folded in my hand. But I didn't read from them. My voice didn't shake. I had learned how to speak when my body wanted to disappear. "My name is Colonel Sierra Langdon," I began. "I've spent more than 2 decades in uniform. I've flown into conflict zones. I've briefed 4-star generals. I've buried people I served beside. I've made calls that saved lives, and some that didn't." There was no reaction yet, just breathing, just waiting. I tell you this not for admiration, but for context, because despite all that, there was a time I wasn't seen, not by the enemy, not by a system, but by my own family. A flicker moved across the room. I was erased from holiday photos, left off invitations. My service was called an embarrassment, my presence at a graduation a threat. I let the silence stretch. I was written out of my family's narrative, not because I failed, but because I didn't fit the version of success they had rehearsed. No shifting in seats, no side murmurs, just listening, focused. I tell you this here, at a place where stories shape policy and recognition becomes legacy, because we cannot build a future that values all who serve if we still quietly permit the erasure of those who break the mold. I paused, scanning the front rows, military spouses, junior officers, senior command, young cadets, civilian leaders. 4 years ago, I was the subject of an anonymous complaint, a fabricated one. Someone tried to discredit me not with facts, but with words like difficult, uncooperative, and divisive. More than a few heads tilted slightly. Everyone in this room knew those were dog whistles. That letter was never proven, because it couldn't be, but it did what it was meant to do. It isolated me, quieted me. I held up a single piece of paper, not the letter, but the approval memo for the SIERA initiative. Today, I stand here to launch something new, a support system for service members who experience betrayal from within their own circles, whether personal or professional. I stepped slightly to the side as the screen lit up behind me. SIERA. Support, integrity, empowerment, resilience, redemption, advocacy. We will offer legal guidance, mental health resources, confidential reporting, peer networks, and a formal mechanism to track how often personal betrayal intersects with professional consequence. A murmur of interest now, note-taking, phone screens lighting up. I'm not here for vengeance, I said. I'm here because silence almost made me forget my own worth. I won't let that happen to others. I took a breath, then closed with the part I hadn't written in advance, the part that came from somewhere deeper. I was once told not to wear my uniform to a family event, because it made others uncomfortable. I looked out over a sea of ribbons and stars, but I wore it, and I will keep wearing it, not because I need to prove anything, but because I know now. Being uncomfortable is not the same as being wrong, and being invisible does not mean being unworthy. The room stayed quiet, not a dismissive quiet, not the kind born from awkwardness, but a different silence, one that respected the weight of what had been said, one that understood that some truths don't need applause to echo. I stepped down from the stage as someone began to clap, just one person at first, then another, then the room rose, not with thunder, but with clarity. They weren't clapping because I won. They were clapping because I told the truth. A photo started circulating a week after the conference. It wasn't an official portrait or anything posed. Someone had taken it from a distance, Savannah standing alone on a rocky bluff above the sea. Her wedding dress caught in the wind, trailing behind her like it no longer belonged to her body, barefoot, hair undone, no caption. Just the tide rising quietly behind her. I didn't seek it out. Someone sent it to me. Have you seen this? They asked. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Eric had filed the annulment. Her side of the family had backed away, publicly and privately. I wasn't surprised. Our mother had never handled scandal well, even when it was of her own making. And for the first time, Savannah wasn't defending herself, or spinning a story, or pointing fingers. She was just there, present in her own grief. Her eyes weren't glassy in that photo. They were open, and somehow clearer than I remembered. Later that week, I received a small envelope in my Pentagon mailbox. No return address, no words, just a folded note card and something tucked inside. The front of the card was blank. Inside was a photo. 2 little girls standing side by side in a dark hallway, each holding a flashlight. The picture was grainy, clearly scanned from an old film print. But I remembered it instantly. That was us. We had gone exploring during a power outage when we were 8 and 10. Our dad had warned us to stay out of the attic, but Savannah insisted. I followed because I always did. We had taken turns leading, flashlights in hand, until we found the box of old books Mom used to read aloud. We sat on the floor, legs crossed, whispering stories to each other in the half-light. For a few hours, we weren't rivals or roles. Just kids who believed there was something magical waiting in forgotten corners. I held the photo in my hands for a long time. No apology, no explanation, just that image. And for the first time, I didn't need words. Savannah had begun therapy. Someone told me she was attending weekly group sessions in Norfolk. She had moved out of the condo she once shared with Eric and was living alone now, in a quiet apartment near the coast. She wasn't pretending anymore. She hadn't asked for forgiveness, but she had sent that picture to remind me that once, before everything got rewritten and twisted and erased, we had seen each other, fully, in the dark, with flashlights. And that was something. That was a beginning. I didn't respond right away. I wasn't sure if I would. But I kept the photo in my drawer, not for nostalgia, not to reopen wounds, but because some bridges don't burn, they just wait, quietly, until someone brings a light. 2 weeks after the defense conference, a cream-colored envelope arrived at my office. No stamp, hand-delivered, military seal embossed in gold. The handwriting was unmistakable. General Elijah Weston. I unfolded the single sheet inside, and for a moment, I simply stared at the opening line. Colonel Langdon, I owe you more than a salute. He had written it himself. Not dictated, not typed. Each letter in his sharp cursive looked like it had been pressed down with intention. That day at the wedding, I stood not only because I recognized your name, I stood because I realized how long I had ignored it, he went on. When Eric first told me he was dating Savannah, I asked questions about her background. I never once thought to ask about her sister. That was my failure, not hers, not yours. They will laugh again. Some will scoff or diminish what they cannot define. They'll still write articles that mention your rank as a curiosity, not as earned merit. But let them reveal themselves. Because what they cannot do anymore, what none of us can do anymore, is erase you. I paused reading, then looked out my office window. Below, cadets crossed the courtyard in formation, the rhythms of the institution I had served nearly 2 decades. I'd spent so much of it being excellent in silence, being present but unnoticed, earning stripes while others collected applause. Your project, SIE will shake more than a few pillars. I've seen the reactions. I've heard the chatter behind closed doors. But I want you to know, it matters, and it will stand. If any man, especially one of my generation, needs to relearn how to see women like you, then let him begin with me. That line stopped me cold. I read it twice, then again. I had expected a note of congratulations, maybe a professional commendation. I did not expect that. An admission, a reckoning, a rebuilding written in ink. The letter closed with words that felt less like closure, more like opening. You remind us what leadership looks like when forged in shadow. You are not an exception, Sierra. You are the beginning of a correction. With respect, General Elijah Weston. I folded the paper carefully, placed it inside a sleeve, locked it in my desk, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew its weight. A general's letter wouldn't fix history, but it told me history could be corrected, one acknowledgement at a time. And sometimes those acknowledgements arrived not with thunder, but with a signature. I live in a whitewashed house carved into the cliffs of Amalfi. The sea here isn't just blue, it's layered. Turquoise in the shallows, ink dark where the mountains dive beneath. It breathes. That's the only way I can describe it. Like a living thing that inhales light and exhales silence. Most mornings begin with paint-stained fingers. The little studio I carved out on the terrace faces the sunrise. I don't paint masterpieces. I paint memory, fractured images, a girl clutching a flashlight, a soldier sitting beside an empty chair, 2 women standing by the sea but facing different directions. I let the colors finish the stories my words never could. By mid-morning, the delivery boy arrives. His name is Mateo. He's 10. He has a mop of dark curls and cheeks full of sunshine. He brings bread wrapped in cloth, occasionally a lemon cake his mother bakes. On the 2nd week, he called me Donna Fantasma, the ghost woman. I smiled. I never corrected him. He once asked me what I did before I came here. I said, I used to teach people how to see things that were hidden. That seemed enough for him. Afternoons belong to the Sierra Fund. We now have 4 active pilot programs, 1 in Texas, 1 in Okinawa, 1 in Bavaria, and 1 still being evaluated at a base outside DC. The mission is simple. When a soldier faces betrayal from those closest, family, spouses, partners, there should be a net. Not just legal, but human. Someone who can say, "I've been there, and we believe you." I write impact reports, data summaries, program proposals, but sometimes I receive something else. A note from a woman who lost custody of her children after exposing fraud in her husband's chain of command. A former pilot who had his credentials destroyed by a brother-in-law who sat on the review board. Their stories are different, but I know the quiet rage behind their words. I know how it feels to be erased without a single scar on your body. The military is no longer on my calendar, but it's still in my veins. I feel it in the way I fold my napkins, in the way I double-check the lock on the balcony door, in the way my eyes sweep a crowd before I walk through it. I don't miss the medals. I miss the clarity. That exact moment when you act, not out of pride, but out of purpose. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed quiet at that wedding, if I had smiled, endured the joke, and left unnoticed. I wonder how much longer it would have taken for Savannah to look in the mirror, for Eric to choose truth over comfort, for me to realize silence wasn't strength, it was erasure. But I didn't stay quiet. And because I didn't, the world tilted just enough to let light fall into corners it had missed before. A few evenings ago, I painted a scene from memory. A long table, silverware catching candlelight, an empty chair, and a woman walking away. Not in shame, not in defeat, but in peace. Mateo saw it the next morning. He pointed to the woman. "Is that you, Donna Fantasma?" I nodded. "But you don't look like a ghost," he said. "She looks full." I smiled and didn't answer. Some truths don't need words. They just need to be lived, quietly, fully, day after day. The sea outside crashes and calms. I breathe with it. And for the first time in years, I feel entirely, irrevocably alive. It was late afternoon when the call came. I had just finished washing brushes when my phone buzzed. The caller ID was blocked, but something in me already knew. I answered. A voice, measured, male, polished, came through. "Colonel Langdon," he began, though I hadn't worn that title in 2 years. "We'd like you to consider chairing the newly formed Council on Integrity in Military Leadership." I paused. The Mediterranean wind curled in through the open shutters, warm and salted. Below, a fishing boat traced the coast like a thread. "I see," I said, carefully. He continued. "Your history, your vision for institutional reform, your leadership. You're the reason this council exists, ma'am. We believe you're the one to lead it." My hand rested on the windowsill. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long gold on the tiled floor. I thought of all the years I had spent inside structures made of rank and regulation. I thought of how long I had measured my worth by evaluations, ribbons, and assignments that asked for excellence, but rarely saw the woman behind it. For a moment, I imagined saying yes. I could already see the press release, the panel meetings, the polished statements, the quiet resistance from those who would say they respected me, but resented my presence. I could do it. I had the skills, the will, the scars. But then I saw Mateo's drawing from earlier that morning, still drying on the table. 2 figures holding flashlights, shining into a dark cave. One of them had wings. "I'm honored," I finally said, "truly, but no." A pause. "No," he echoed. "No," I said again, this time without hesitation. "I believe in the mission. I'll advise, if needed. I'll send names, brilliant names, but I won't lead it. May I ask why?" "You just did," I replied gently, "and the answer is simple. It's time for someone else, someone who hasn't already bled for the table they now sit at." I could feel his confusion through the silence, but also, perhaps, his respect. "I see. Thank you for your candor, ma'am." "Take care of the council," I said, "and don't forget who it's meant to protect." He hung up with a formal farewell. I placed the phone down. Outside, the bells from the monastery chimed 6 times. A woman below watered her herbs. Mateo waved at me from across the alley, his backpack bouncing. I waved back. Some would say I turned my back on power, but they'd be wrong. I chose freedom, not to abandon responsibility, but to reclaim something I had long forgotten I was allowed to want. A life that wasn't built solely from what I could endure. I earned that life, and for once, I chose it. Not because someone needed me, but because I needed me. I don't need anyone's apology, not anymore. I don't need the family who erased me to call me brave. I don't need strangers to whisper my name like I was a myth. I don't even need the medals to mean more than the silence I once endured. All I ask is this: don't teach another child they have to disappear as someone else in order to be seen. Don't raise daughters to believe there's only one spotlight. And don't raise sons to think silence makes them safe. I lived too long chasing approval that never came. I wore uniforms like armor, not just against bullets, but against shame, against invisibility. For a while, it worked. I became everything they said I couldn't. And still, I came home to silence. But I've stopped asking for a seat at the table. I built my own. Now I live, not to be remembered, but to remember others. To the quiet ones in the back row. To those told they were too much or not enough. To anyone who has ever been muted in their own story. I see you, and more importantly, you are still here. That matters. That always mattered. I'm not living to be a legend anymore. I'm living to remind the erased that we're not gone. We're just getting started. Before we say goodbye, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Is it a quiet morning with a warm cup of coffee? Or a late night where stories like this keep you company? Let me know in the comments. I read everyone with gratitude. And if this story touched your heart, please consider subscribing to the channel, not just to hear more stories like this, but to be part of a community that still believes in kindness, healing, and second chances. Thank you for spending your time with us today. Wherever you are, I hope you carry this story with you, and remember, sometimes the miracle doesn't knock on your door. It waits quietly until you're ready to open your heart. Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.